I too rise in cautious support of this bill. I think it's incredibly audacious. I mean, this is not a bite at the apple, this is the entire orchard. And I'm also hoping that the authors of this bill will take into consideration some of the very vocal and legitimate opposition that has been raised. I want to echo some of the concerns by the good senator from Los Angeles, who also raised some of them. You know, this bill, as I read it, impacts 4 different codes: the penal code, the insurance code, the welfare and institutions code, and health and safety. And sometimes those codes don't work together. And now we have created this very aspirational and dynamic overhaul of a system. And so I think we should be very rooted in reality that this is not going to see success overnight, because these are systems that have been in place for quite some time in terms of their development, how they've been operationalized, implemented, where they fail, and where they leave people out. You know, the reality is that you cannot legislate buy-in, and this proposal is going to require buy-in from both impacted communities, from the courts, from counties, and from systems. And most importantly, it's going to require an infusion of human contact, of people working with people. And what you don't want is to create a new system of chutes and ladders where people are funneled through new chaos that's been designed to help them get treatment or force them into treatment, and it doesn't work because there is not the human connection of like the check-ins and the understandings and the non-judgmental support. I caution that there are family members and friends of people who are impacted who are not interested in their people's well-being and success. There are nefarious folks out there interested in A, gaming systems, and B, taking advantage of people who need help. And how do we make sure when we're creating a system that we are not leaning, you know, because you have to have the support from the family member, or this person is gonna, you know, write in a letter, and they're involved in the decision-making of this person's health and well-being. What are the checks and balances to make sure that the folks that are really interested in that person's success are at the table? And I also hope that this doesn't create a cottage industry for lawyers who are helping families and friends like navigate this new thing, because we know where that can end up. You know, lastly, I just want to say that self-determination is incredibly important. It is primary for me. And it's primary for folks from the disability community. It's also really primary for folks who are mentally unwell, and for homeless folks, and for Black and brown communities that find themselves in these systems disproportionately. And I just want to share 2 stories that I think help resonate both my concern and my support for this bill. The first one is Fatima. Fatima is homeless. She has AIDS, she's blind, she's homeless. She was moved into Project Room Key after living on the streets for a really long time. She has a caregiver, her boyfriend, who's also her dealer, and her part-time user friend, and her pimp. And they both ended up in Project Room Key. And in sharing this story, I was like, well, you need to get away from this man. And the healthcare provider said, yeah, we've been trying to do that, but she won't go. And I said, this doesn't make any sense. They both ended up in Project Room Key. Then there was a series of events, and she got kicked out. And she ended up pitching a tent right next door to the facility so she could be close to her friend, who was her caregiver, her pimp, her dealer. Me and providers were like, well, now she's out. Get her. Now that she's out, how do we help her get away from this person? And they said, well, you know, her belief is that she would rather be abused by the person that she knows, who is getting money every month because he is her caregiver. So he's giving her her medication, he's getting her around because she is blind, and he's also abusing her. And she said she would rather be with that person than out on the street alone being abused and sexualized by so many other people. Now, is she defiant or is she self-determinant? And is it my right to determine that? I still have conflict about this story about Fatima. But Fatima is not one person. There are thousands of Fatimas out there. And she pitched her tent next to where he was to be close to a man who was abusing her. The second story is David. David's sister babysat me when I was little. Close family friend. David was smart and attractive and going places. David took a trip and became schizophrenic. And David, he got help when he wanted to, and he didn't when he didn't want to. David was over 18, and so the doctor said to his mother, my good friend, we cannot mandate David to get help. So there were days when David would walk by his mother and did not notice her at all, did not recognize her. I went to visit them. David went into the room. He was talking to himself in a voice that was so demonic that it made me deeply afraid. David tried to set their condo on fire, and they had to go. David walked into Lake Michigan, and his mother had to identify him as a John Doe with a tag on his foot at the coroner's office. I grew up with David. David deserved to get help. Maybe that help would have saved his life. But I don't know which voice or voices, Francine or the doctors or David, should have listened to. David is why we need something like this. Fatima is why we need to be incredibly cautious and thoughtful about the opposition. I don't talk much about David, but it is very hard, and oftentimes folks who are mentally unwell and have schizophrenia are left into the margins of our societies. And they do have a right. They have a right to be listened to. And once again, did David abdicate, or was it self-determination? These are so important questions that we need to really make sure we get right. So I will be supporting this bill, but I will be thinking about both of those people while this makes its way to the other side, because both of their stories are important.